Hello, my name is Knoch from Knoch Interiors, and today we're going to install a convertible top on a 1970 Corvette, starting with the removal of the convertible top, the tack strip if necessary, the installation of the pads, and the final installation of the convertible top to meet NCRS standards. Before we start removing the convertible top, I'd like to point out a few things that are wrong with this convertible top. One of them is the windlace in the front doesn't come down far enough. It should come down to right about the end of my thumb. Also, the convertible top was pulled too far down over the weather stripping and should be right about here. Also, the stitching on the convertible top is not even supposed to be there. It's supposed to be dielectrically sealed. Also, as you can see, this is a common problem, either being too short or too long on the sides of the convertible top. This particular side of the convertible top is too long. As you can see, the top should be fitting right about here, leaving an excess of material, and it doesn't look right. As you can see, the seam on this convertible top is sewn, and it is supposed to be dielectrically sealed. This seam here is also sewn and should be dielectrically sealed. The rear window has stitching in it, and it is supposed to be dielectrically sealed on the outside. Down in the lower area of the convertible top, you can see that the binding is pulled up, exposing the rear bow. This binding is supposed to be flush so that you can't see any material on the underside of the rear bow. On this side of the convertible top, you can see that the binding is pulled way up, exposing the rear bow. Over here, you have the opposite problem that you had on the other side. The convertible top is actually 3/4 of an inch too short. Up here, you can see that the convertible top is pulled too far down on the side. Some of the tools that we're going to be using today for our installation is a steamer, a ready heater, which puts out 50,000 BTUs of heat and is like a giant heat gun. Some of the smaller tools that we're going to be using today is a glue dispenser, a heat gun. We also have two staplers here, one being air and one being hand operated. Most of you will be able to come up with a hand gun very easily. This happens to be an arrow gun. We're using 3/8 staples. We also have a knife, an X-Acto blade, a couple of wrenches, a screwdriver, a tack hammer, a couple of nut drivers, a side cutters for pulling out staples, a punch, a pencil or pen, scissors, Phillips screwdriver, long nose pliers, regular pliers, staple puller, and small Phillips, and a tape measure. Some of the accessories that you'll be receiving in your convertible top kit will be the front windlace, which is already covered, and it has foam on the inside. The rear straps, convertible top straps, there'll be 2 of them. The pads, which are attached to the frame, there'll be 2 of those. The wire-on, which will also include the screws and the chrome tips. Over here we'll have a new hold-in cord which holds the rear bow weather stripping to the rear bow. Over here is a set of tack strip, and we'll determine whether we need it or not after we take off the old convertible top. And here is the convertible top itself. As you can see, the rear window is sealed in on the inside. It has dielectrically sealed seams. And over here is the dealer tag, the original dealer tag. On this particular convertible top, we've put a date stamp on the rear window, and that is the date that the car was manufactured. Now, before installing the convertible top, you want to make sure that you've checked all the seams to make sure that there's no misstitching, any bad seals in the seams, and everything is perfect before you start the job. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do is remove the chrome tip and the screw that covers up the wire on. Now this is wire on, and the reason it's called wire on is because it has wire in it. So we'll be bending it up like so that we can get at the staples, so we can pull the staples out. We're going to be bending up the wire on so we can expose the staples. And then we'll start removing the staples from the wire on. Okay, now we've removed the wire on, and we're going to cut the convertible top off. So I'm going to stick my fingers up underneath the pad to make sure that we don't cut the pad right now. This is the most fun part of the job, cutting the convertible top, especially if the customer is standing watching. Let's go ahead. Okay, after removing the bulk of the convertible top, we're going to now finish up by pulling the rest of the remnants of the top off. After that's done, then we'll be taking all the staples out of the tack strip. And this is the tack strip area right in here. Okay, the tack strip seems to be in very good condition. You can tell by the fact that when you pull the convertible top material that the staples are not pulling out of chunks of tack strip, and it seems to be in really good shape. If we needed tack strip on this would have to be dug out, and the new plastic tack strip would have to be inserted in. And the way that's done is you take a heat gun and you heat up the tack strip, and it actually goes in between the metal, and then when it cools, it stays in position. Okay, at this time we're going to check the rear bow screws, the two screws on each side of the rear bow that hold the rear bow on. And we would also at this time go ahead and take some 10W40 and kind of spray it on the bolts that hold the weather stripping on the sides. Here, 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 here. In this area on the rear bow. What that does, it just eliminates screws breaking off and having to re-drill and re-tap. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to remove the whole rear bow, including the two straps, and we'll do that by taking the rest of the staples out of this strap on this side and this side. And then we will remove the 4 screws, 2 of them over here, 2 of them over there, that hold the rear bow on. Okay, this is the rear bow assembly, and we'll put that aside for a minute. Okay, the next step, we're going to clean off the front header, getting rid of the windlace and the rest of the material in the front, and also all the staples in the front. So we'll lift up the rear deck, and you might want to put a rag or something soft so that you can lean the front header bow on it like this. Then we're going to remove the 1 screw on this side that holds the weather stripping in the front and pull it off to the side. Then we'll start removing the staples in the front of the convertible top. All these staples, it has to be perfectly cleaned off so that there's no staples left. And once we get this off, we'll be able to check the tack strip underneath this area to see if we need to replace that. As I'm removing these staples, you might notice that I have a sharp pointed object similar to an ice pick. That works real well for pulling up one side of the staple. Then once you've got them all loosened, then you can take a side cutters and actually pull the staple out like so. Okay, the screws have been removed off the weather stripping, so we're going to pull it off to the side and peel this material, which in this particular case is really glued in there. And we're going to continue across, pulling the staples out of the actual material of the top that was pulled over and stapled before we put the weather stripping on. As you can see, the tack strip on this car is really bad, and the reason that this particular car is so bad was the fact that it had a convertible top on that had stitched seams instead of electrosealed seams, and the water has leaked through the convertible top and caused the cardboard to deteriorate. As you can see, these metal tabs right here, these may be good, but we'll have to see when we get into it a little bit further. These actually hold the tack strip on the front bow, but in a case where they might break off, what we can do is drill a hole through the front header, actually holding the tack strip on with a screw, and then later on grinding the pointed part of the screw off and then put a piece of tape on it to make it smooth. So with this inspection here, it looks like we're into a little bit of extra work. As you can see, we're bending up the metal tabs now, and hopefully none of them are going to break. So we'll go completely across the front header, bend up all the tabs, clean it out with a wire brush and so on, and then put this new tack strip in. Okay, we've discovered now that the weather stripping, the front bow header weather stripping is completely shot. So we're going to remove the old weather stripping, which is just totally disintegrated, and replace it with a new weather stripping, which is held on by these little white tabs. and they're like a screw type fixture, and you just push it on with your thumb and it goes down into the hole and holds it on. So we're going to be putting a new weather stripping on. This will also help. This is another reason why the front bow was so bad, because this actually keeps the water from getting into this area. Okay, now we've cleaned this area up. We've bent all the tabs up. None of the tabs broke, so we don't have to do the screwing through the weather stripping, or through the tack strip, excuse me. Now, as you can see on the edge of this, we've trimmed this off on an angle, and that matches the curve of the front header bow. So we've trimmed it off, and she's ready to go in. And now we're going to start bending these tabs over, and this is what holds the tack strip on. Now, as you can see, this looks pretty rusty, and it's not, even though it isn't showing, some of you guys might want to, you know, have it painted and sandblasted and so on, so that, you know, it could be judged by NCRS. So we'll continue bending the tabs over, and after this is done, then we'll be installing the weather stripping. And as you can see, the holes, these little tabs get pushed down into the holes. Now, as you can see, we've got all the tabs bent over. The tack strip is in place. It's secure. And now we're going to be actually installing the weather stripping. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do, or have already done, is remove the screw that holds the top cable. Now, this cable is very important because it slides into a little sleeve on the convertible top and keeps the convertible top from shrinking up in the center on these years, 68 through 75. So we've disconnected that, and we're just going to let this hang. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is remove this vertical weather stripping. It has 4 screws in it, so you have a nut driver in the back and a Phillips head in the front, and just remove this weather stripping. Okay, the next step after removing the vertical weather stripping is the convertible top pads. As you can see, they're stapled on the rear bow, stapled on the front bow, and also inside the pad they're stapled on to bow number 2 and bow number 1. Don't worry about marking the pad, because there's this little bend in the rear bow, and that's where the convertible top pad starts. So when you restaple it on, you line it up right there. Then you want to take the staples out of bow number 2 and bow number 1, and just peel it off. Exposing more tack strip. Small piece of tack strip here, small piece of tack strip here, and a small piece of tack strip here. Okay, as you can see, the tack strip on the rear bow is good. Also on bow number 2 is good. Also on bow number 1 is good. This little piece in the front, we're going to replace. It's always a good idea to replace that, because that's where all your tension is. So what we'll do is we'll clean up, get the rest of the staples out of the tack strip, and then replace this small piece here, and then we'll be ready to install the new pad. Okay, we're going to replace the front pad tack strip, and we'll do this by bending up the two tabs, removing the tack strip, which was cardboard, and replacing it with plastic tack strip. Then we bend the tabs down. And that's it for the front tack strip. We're ready to actually start installing the pads now. Okay, now we're going to be installing the convertible top pad. You can see this little indentation here on the rear bow. So you take the end of the pad that would go on this side, and that goes right in that little indentation. And you take the convertible top material and you staple it on the top. Then you pull, using the edge of this material to line up with the edge of the rear bow, you pull so that you've got a little bit of tension on it. You can see that. That'll keep it from wrinkling this way. So then you go ahead and you run a staple in here, and then you just continue around until you've stapled the whole rear. Now we'll move up to the front. And this, what you want to do is pull this down so that this pad doesn't go down over the edge or too far up in this area. So you pull it right so the material butts up with the groove in the front. Okay, we're going to be stapling on the front of the pad now, and we want to go about 1/8 of an inch to 3/16 of an inch above this edge of the metal right here. We also want to move the material so it runs parallel with the groove in the front header. So once we've got that location established, then we'll put a staple in it to hold it. And now we've got it locked into position so it can't slide either way. And we'll throw a staple in here, staple in here, 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 here. Now, you notice the staples don't go all the way down, so then you take a tack hammer, and that'll kind of like bend the staple up on the underside of the tack strip and help lock it into place. Okay, so we've got the front of the pad done now, the rear of the pad done. Now comes the two bows. Now you notice that there's some felt on here. 95% of the time this felt will be good, so you don't need to replace it. If you do need to replace it, felt is available that you can peel this out and replace it. Okay, now you'll notice that the marks are on the convertible top pad, on the inside of the pad, and that's where you will staple these bows. Otherwise, that shows you the position that they're supposed to be in. So what we'll do is go ahead, keeping this parallel with this piece of metal right here and lining it up with the mark that's already on the pad. Go ahead and staple that. You can use your two fingers to kind of guide where the tack strip is. Pulling it a little bit sideways now we'll go to the second bow, and that's lined up with the chalk, and just kind of give a little bit of tension on this rear bow to kind of look at the pad to see that there's no wrinkles in it. If you see some lateral wrinkles, then you know that you have to pull it up like so. Put a staple in one side, staple in another, and just go ahead all the way across. Okay, before gluing the pad, finishing the pad up and gluing it together, we can just check this again and make sure our alignment, that the pad is not too far down and not too far up. Just basically running right along the top of this little flange here. Okay, now this is the actual padded part of a pad. That's what protects the convertible top material from the metal bows and the staples. So what we do with that is line it up and then actually put a little bit of glue to hold it in place. And that pad should go right up, covering these staples. And right up to the edge of the rear tack, not covering the staples in the back, because we don't want to build up too much material. Okay, then what we do, pull the material down over the top, like so. Put some glue on the material. And just put the two pieces together. Try not to end up with any excess material making any lumps or bumps. Then we'll go back over here and actually staple some more. Then we'll move down to the back. Trim off any excess material. And now we're ready to put the convertible top on. While Gilbert is putting on the other pad, I might recommend that 3M contact cement be used for the gluing of the pads and the flaps and other areas of the convertible top. Okay, now we're going to start on the rear bow. Remember, we took it off a while back, and we're going to pull this rubber out of the rear bow, which it's stuck into a groove. So this rubber is shot, so we're going to replace it with a new rubber. So we're going to just pull it out. Like so. Okay, now we've got the remnants of the old convertible top still in there, and that's held in with a little cord, as you can see, where the material is sewed over a cord, and it's kind of like stuck into a groove on the side. So we're going to pull that out. Now, whoever installed this before used glue. It's not necessary to use glue on this. We're just going to pull that out. Okay, now we've got the old top and the weather stripping out of the rear bow, and if you would like, you can clean all this off of here, but it's not going to make any difference. Now we're going to turn the bow over, and we're going to start replacing the straps, and they're held on by 2 screws and a plate. Now, earlier when we first took the convertible top off, I sprayed these with 3-in-1 oil so that they'd come out real nice and easy. Now, these are the straps that come in the kit, and as you can see, we make the length for 56 to 60, 63 to 7, 61 and 2, and 68 to 75. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this scissors and we're going to cut it right on this line. Now that we've cut the straps to the proper length and angle, we lay the strap over the holes and actually make a punch hole in the material where the screws go in, and then actually screw the screw through the material, and then install the screws into the rear bow. Making sure that on this strap that the raw edge of the material right here is to the facing you, so that on the inside of the car you'll be looking at a finished edge. Okay, we're now installing the rear bow just temporarily so that we can get a measurement from the end of the bow to the vertical metal, and we'll show you exactly where that is. Okay, we've reinstalled the rear bow on this convertible top, and we're going to take a measurement from the end of the rear bow to the vertical piece of metal here and see that it comes out 1.5 inches. Okay. Now we're going to take that measurement and transfer it to the convertible top, so that when we take the rear bow over to the table to install the convertible top on it, we'll know exactly where to start tucking the convertible top in. So we'll measure from this stitch, not from here, but from here, and that's 1.5 inches, and I put a mark there. And we'll go around to the other side and do the same exact thing. So that way, when the convertible top is installed on the rear bow, it'll look like this rather than this or this. We'll know exactly where we're going. I used a ballpoint pin on this, but I put a little piece of chalk so you could see the mark. And I'm going to line that mark up with the end of this bow. Now, I've got it lined up, and then I'm going to start tucking this cord area of the convertible top into a groove that's actually this way. So I've got a flat screwdriver, and I'm going to start tucking it in the groove like so. And I'm going to go about 8 inches just to where it starts to curve. Maybe 10 inches. Then I'm going to stop, and then we're going to go around to the other side and do the same thing, not worrying about the center. Now we're going to install the weather stripping on the same side of the rear bow that we installed the convertible top. And the reason for this is we're going to lock this material in place so that when we pull the convertible top around to the other mark, it won't give or slide. Now, I've taken WD-40 and I've sprayed in this area, and I've sprayed on the weather stripping so that the cord, which is right here, which is supplied in the convertible top kit, will be able to fit down into this groove. It's a very tight groove, and the only way that you can really get it in correctly is to put WD-40 or something slippery to get it in. But once it's in, it won't come out. And I'm using a flat screwdriver, and I'm kind of pressing down on the cord and twisting a little bit so that it pulls the rubber down into the groove. But we're only going to do this for about 8 inches. And that's just to ensure that the convertible top won't slip. You want to make sure that you check it over and make sure that the groove is all the way in, because this is actually what holds the rear of the convertible top on. Okay, now we're heating the convertible top up so that we'll be able to get about 3/4 of an inch of stretch on the convertible top. Remember, we've got this mark lined up over here, and we have to get that mark lined up on the other side. So this will give us the ability to get it stretched over there. Now, you notice when Gilbert is using the heat gun, he keeps it moving because you can't keep it in one spot or else you'll melt the material. You can kind of feel it with your fingers, and you can feel the temperature of the material. If it's too hot for your fingers, it's too hot for the material. So this will make it a lot easier to get the material stretched around to the other side. Okay, we've got the convertible top warmed up very nicely, and you see the mark on this side over here. So we're just going to pull it up to that mark, make sure that she's pulled around nicely. Then take the screwdriver and start tucking this in, holding this with your thumb so that doesn't move, and just keep going right around the corner. That'll lock it in place. And then we'll go ahead and finish tucking in the cord all the way around, making sure that that cord gets locked in. Now we can start working on the center. Okay, we've got the convertible top tucked in all the way around the edge. Now we're taking the hold-in cord and we're tucking it into the rubber. And I have sprayed 10W40 on the rear bow, and I'm going to spray a little bit on the rubber, just so it'll slide in nice and easily. Also, you want to check to make sure that the rubber is long enough to go all the way to the other side, and if it isn't, it can be stretched, and you can stretch it as you go along. So we'll continue tucking in the cord. If it doesn't go in the first time, just keep pushing on it and she'll go in. Now that we've installed the convertible top onto the rear bow and we've installed the weather stripping onto the rear bow, we're going to install the rear bow onto the convertible top frame with these 4 screws. Okay, we've attached the rear bow and the convertible top onto the frame. Now the next thing that we have to do is the strap that's behind the convertible top here that we attach to the rear bow has to be positioned onto the tack strip of this bow. So what we'll do is we've positioned the convertible top where it's going to go, and we'll grab the strap, which is behind here. I don't know if you can see it or not, and we'll make sure that it is in the center of this seam, not over this way so it would show on the window, or not too far this way. So you can line that up in the center and then put a little chalk mark right here, and that's going to be the edge of the strap, which we will attach before we start working on the actual convertible top itself. And of course we'll do the same thing on the other side. Okay, we're pulling the convertible top back now so that we can get at the straps. We've previously marked where the straps go, and we have also put a rag or some item to keep the convertible top frame, take the tension off in the front. Now we've got this mark, so what we're going to do is staple this strap on to the tack strip. Make sure that you get it securely in there because there's a lot of pressure on that. Okay, while Gilbert is installing the other strap, you'll see that the strap is cut to the right length, so we went to about half of the tack strip area here and stapled the strap in that area. That's what you use for your alignment. Okay, we're going to start stapling the rear window on now, and we've got the convertible top in pretty good position now. As you can see, the material, in order to make this fairly taut here, is going to go about 1/4 of an inch further. That doesn't matter because there is a variability in this area here. The main thing that you want to make sure on is that this line is parallel with this line. Otherwise, you end up with a cocked rear window. So I'm going to pull up about 1/4 of an inch here and start stapling in the center of the bow. And I'm kind of, as I move along here, I'm trying to keep this amount of material about the same, which will mean that these lines here will be parallel. So we'll throw in a few more staples. Okay, when I get to this point, you can see where this is the joint between this section and this section. This has to end up in the center of your tack strip. So as you can see, it's not quite in the center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it back and pull it up a little bit, and she's right in the center. Exactly in the center. So I'll throw staple in there to hold it. I'll finish up across here and checking the side, making sure that we're not going too far or back this way. So when we look at the convertible top, it'll be a straight line on the side. I'll throw in another one right here. Throw in a few extra here. Now you might also notice that we've put a piece of foam rubber in the front of the convertible top. It's unlatched. That's to give us more flexibility with the rear window. Once we get ready to install the front of the convertible top, we'll take that off. But right now, we're going to finish up the whole rear of the convertible top, including trimming this off and then stapling this part, the main section of the convertible top, and making sure that it's tacked over so the water runs down off the top. And then we'll be installing the wire on and the chrome tips. Okay, I wanted to mention that, see where this joint is between this part of the top and the rear window area? Notice that I have, the tack strip is right about here, the end of it. So I've got a staple holding this particular area. There's going to be a lot of tension there. And then we take and we trim this material off right inside the tack strip, just behind it, so that there's no material that's going to be hanging over on the inside. Okay, now Gilbert is hammering down the staples to make sure that they're not sticking up. Just a nice, to make it nice and smooth for the next piece of material, the top layer that we're going to staple on top of it. Okay. Now comes for the more or less finishing up of the stapling in the back, and we might want to just kind of take a look at things and see how it's coming along. And it looks pretty good. We're lined up here. Gilbert's side is lined up. Now I'm going to take my 2 fingers, and that's going to show me how thick that tack strip is. So I'm going to take the staple gun and right between my fingers, I'll just run them along like so, like so. Okay, as you can see, Gilbert is trimming the material behind the staples, and it's